If you'd asked me if I ever thought I'd be sitting in a doctor's clinic waiting to find out if I was pregnant or not, I'd have laughed in your face. No 14-year-old ever wants to be in that kind of situation, and yet that's exactly where I found myself. It was one of those bright spring days, and I had to look at my feet because the sun was shining directly into my eyes. And, okay, I'll admit it, I was nervous. I looked up, squinting slightly, and the doctor was standing there, staring at me. He looked nervous too. Did that mean I really was pregnant? Sweat began to trickle down my back, and I could feel my skin burning up. He asked me to follow him into the room, and without even looking at me, asked me to sit down. Avril, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Hot tears were prickling in my eyes as he told me that. And then I was stopped in my tracks. It appears that you are suffering from a rare hormonal disorder. Although you are only 14, according to your test results, you are in fact biologically closer to the age of 63. What this means is that I didn't hear anything else he said. What did he mean? The room was spinning and I felt like I was going to pass out. 63? 63 years old? Wait, did that mean I wasn't pregnant? I must have started crying because the next thing I knew, the doctor was sitting next to me, telling me it was going to be okay, and that there were researchers who specialized in this kind of disorder. I couldn't believe I'd thought I was pregnant, when, in fact, this was pretty much the opposite news. He went on to explain that I'd basically undergone early menopause, and that was why I was no longer getting my period, and had been experiencing these hot flushes. Even at that moment, as he told me all of this, I was experiencing my worst hot flush to date. I felt like someone had dipped me into a fire. That's how much I was sweating and burning up. He told me I should have brought a parent or guardian with me because legally I couldn't pick up the medicine he wanted to prescribe me without an adult. Everything he said to me was so confusing, and all I wanted was to run away. Why couldn't I be normal like every other girl my age? It's crazy when I think about it because when I first got my period, I thought I was dying. And I remember saying to my friend Jessie that I wished I would never have another one. That's how painful it was. It felt like I was bleeding to death. And yet, as I walked away from the doctor's clinic, all I wanted was to get my period. Things could change so fast, and I cursed myself for wishing them away like that. Worse than hearing that I would never have children was the fact I had to tell my mom. I mean, without her, I wouldn't be able to get the hormone replacement pills. But what difference would they make anyway? I was a freak. How did my life come to this? A couple of months ago, I was just a normal teenage girl, complaining about school, crushing on boys, and hanging out with my friends. And now I was some old woman trapped in a young girl's body. Nothing could be worse than this, I told myself as I walked home, trying to drown out my feelings with loud music playing in my ears. And to think I'd been so naive to believe that I was pregnant. I mean, get a grip, Avril. I had put off going to the doctor for so long because I was so paranoid about it. The weird symptoms I'd been having started about 6 months ago. At first, my period disappeared. Then I started sweating a lot, and I could barely sleep because I just felt hot all the time, even in the middle of winter. I thought it was all in my head, but the more I thought about it, the more my body felt different inside. I stupidly mentioned it to Jessie one weekend when she was staying over, and she was like, Avril, maybe you're pregnant. My cousin told me this story where a girl went swimming with some boys and she got pregnant. Like, for reals. I just laughed. I mean, come on. No one gets pregnant from that, right? Well, sooner or later, I started to believe it. I Googled my symptoms and everything pointed to pregnancy. I didn't want to go out and buy a test because I was sure the lady in the pharmacy would judge me. So that's why I went to see the doctor. I don't know what news I would have preferred, to be pregnant or this. When I got home, my mom's car was in the driveway. I had to pretend I'd been at school, even though I'd snuck out at lunchtime for my appointment. I walked in, my heart pounding with fear. What if she could tell something was wrong? Luckily for me, she was on a call, and so I slipped up to my room without her so much as even noticing. Once inside, I sank onto my bed and cried. I cried for how awful I felt, how scared I was to tell my mom, and then what about my friends? What would they even think of me? Suddenly, something I hadn't even thought of flickered through my head. Was I going to die? The doctor had said I was biologically similar to that of a 63-year-old. So what? Was I going to die in like 10 to 15 years? I wanted to punch something. This wasn't fair. I was only 14 years old. I had my whole life ahead of me, or at least so I thought. That night, I didn't even want to eat. I felt so empty inside. And I guess I was empty, right? There were no babies in there, no eggs waiting to become babies one day. I might as well be dead. I closed my eyes and climbed under the covers. I knew I wouldn't sleep, but maybe if I slept, I'd wake up and realize this was just one big horrible nightmare, and I was actually a normal girl after all. 5 minutes later, my mom's voice echoed through the house. I tried to block it out, but then I realized she was calling me. I really didn't want to deal with whatever problem she had right now, but if I didn't go down, she'd just continue to shout. My mom was pretty highly strung, being a single mom and having a busy job. She didn't exactly have the easiest time. I went downstairs, quickly glancing in the mirror to make sure my eyes weren't too swollen from all the crying. She was waiting at the bottom of the stairs and she had this manic look in her eyes. Had she been drinking? I knew she drank a lot these days due to stress, but this was something more. As she shouted at me, she almost spat. "Why on earth would you think it's okay to skip school, young lady? A little birdie told me she saw you at the doctor's clinic. What have you got to say about that? Something you're not telling me, is there?" I just stared at her. She had her hands on her hips, and suddenly I felt so small and helpless. In a small voice, I told her I didn't want to talk about it. I expected her to leave me be, but instead she grabbed me by the arm and dragged me through to the lounge. "Tell me what's wrong right now or you're grounded," she yelled at me. "Mom, well, it's complicated." Then I burst into tears. Through my heaving sobs, I told her how I wasn't able to have kids, that I'd gone to the doctor because I'd been feeling weird. I didn't tell her the part about where I thought I'd been pregnant. She would have killed me. I then went on to explain that I needed her to sign something so that I could take hormone replacement pills for my menopause. Menopause? You what? You mean I'll never be a grandma? You are a disgrace. What is wrong with you? And at that, she also burst into tears. I couldn't believe her. I just told her I had some weird disorder, and all she was concerned about was that she wouldn't ever be a grandma. I ran to my room and slammed the door. My mom was acting like the most selfish person in the world. How was I even related to her? Later that night, there was a knock on my door. It was my mom. I didn't want to see her, but she came in anyway. She was still crying, and she started apologizing, saying it was her fault and that she felt so guilty. I didn't understand. She said that during the pregnancy with me, she had continued to drink, even though she knew it was wrong, and maybe she was somehow responsible for the disorder I had. I turned to her and told her to stop it. It wasn't her fault. The doctor said this was a rare disorder, but it was no one's fault. It just happened, and unfortunately, I was one of the unlucky ones. I knew there was no point in holding a grudge with Mom. I could die soon, I thought, and that's when I realized I couldn't live like this. I needed more information. The next day, Mom and I went to see the doctor, and he explained everything. I would need to take the hormone pills for the rest of my life. When he said this, I interrupted him and said, "Oh, what, you mean for the next 10 years? Because I'm going to die then, aren't I?" Both the doctor and my mom stared at me in horror, and then the doctor actually laughed. "Die?" he said. Avril, no, dear. This is a serious hormone issue, but you aren't going to die. Yes, biologically you are 63, but you will still live to be a ripe old lady. And who knows, by the time you're 20, there might be some miracle cure to solve this. Don't give up hope. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one with empty ovaries and the prospect of a future without kids. I felt like I'd been forced to grow up. I'd gone from being carefree to someone who had skipped womanhood. I was old inside. No one would ever want to date me. I'd be the laughingstock at school, as if being a teenager wasn't already challenging enough. I was grateful Mom was there because she appeared to understand more than I did. The doctor asked us to wait outside for my prescription to be ready and asked me to come see him again in 1 month's time. We waited in silence. The doctor was seeing another patient, and he told us he wouldn't be long. After about 10 minutes, the door opened, and an old lady shuffled out. She looked at me and smiled and said, "Chin up, dearie. Life can't be that bad, can it? Look at me. I'm 89 and I'm dying, but hey, I'm still smiling." I blinked and just nodded at her. I closed my eyes for a second and tried to gather my thoughts. When I opened them, she was gone, and Mom was standing there with her hand out. "Come on, love, let's get your medicine and get you home. You're going to be okay, I promise." And I believed her. At that moment, I believed her. I knew I'd be okay, because honestly, there is always someone out there who is dealing with something much worse than you are. Besides, I'm still too young to think about babies. I mean, I'm sure that in 15 years I can adopt a baby, or maybe they'll find a cure. Maybe even men would be able to give birth. Anyway, who knows what will happen? And from that day onwards, I decided to adopt an attitude like that old lady had. Life really isn't that bad, right?
Hi, I am Lauren. The story I'm about to share with you is about something that struck me the moment I discovered it. I really had no idea how I should behave then, and I think anyone in my shoes would have gone speechless too. So, a few months ago, my dad drove me to my best friend Diana's house for her birthday party. He insisted on entering with me to wish her a happy birthday. I was embarrassed, really embarrassed. I mean, I am 15, and Diana invited almost everyone I know. I didn't want them to go around saying that my dad had joined me at my friend's party. Anyway, he walked into the house with me, wished her a happy birthday, and spent the rest of the time talking to her mom and laughing together. I was glad that no one noticed him or seemed to care about his existence. But once everyone else had left, I realized that my dad
got a job as Laura's assistant. I thought I was set for life. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be locked away like a prisoner in Azkaban. Hi, my name is Jolene. My life changed drastically about 3 months ago. Before I continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. If you do, you would win $1 million within the next 7 days. It really works. I was looking through the classifieds for a job while sitting on my bed in my tiny apartment when the words personal assistant needed caught my eyes. I mumbled to myself as I carefully read the ad. Need one female personal assistant, age 25, 5'5" tall, slim build, short wavy black hair that goes by the name Rebecca. Pay per month $5,000 plus bonuses. Call 555-7625 for more information. My eyes widened when I realized the amount of money that would be paid. Well, my name isn't Rebecca, but I sure look the part. I grabbed my phone that was sitting next to me and called the number. The person on the next side gave me the address, as well as the time of my interview, which was carded for the next day. I arrived at the address by taxi, and to my surprise, it wasn't an ordinary work office as I had expected. It was a mansion. I jumped out of the taxi and pressed the intercom nervously. "Hi, good afternoon," I said in the best customer service voice. "My name is Rebecca Miller, and I'm here for the job interview." I waited for a few seconds. The only response was the opening of the huge gates that seemed to close off the mansion from the rest of the world. I approached the front door and pressed the doorbell. The door was opened by a slim, elderly man with a solemn face who was dressed in a butler's uniform. "Good afternoon," I said politely and extended my hand. The man ignored my hand, which I placed by my side once more, and said, "Follow me." He waited for me to enter before closing the door behind us. He walked briskly, and I followed in silence. Everything we passed seemed like a blur to me. I was trying to get a glimpse of everything when I bumped into someone. "Excuse me," I said, embarrassed. The lady in the maid outfit just smiled and nodded as she went about her business. We came upon huge ivory doors and stopped. The man knocked twice, opened the door, and nodded at me to enter. I smiled and entered the room. He closed the door behind me. As I walked further into the room, I noticed a slender woman with large blue eyes and blonde wavy hair sat behind the desk. I approached and she greeted me with a smile. "Hi, Rebecca. Have a seat. My name is Laura Hamilton." We talked for a few minutes, and to my surprise, she didn't ask for my resume or even my identification. I was in luck. "So how soon can you start?" Laura asked. My eyes lit up. "I got the job! I got the job!" I celebrated in my head, but I calmly responded, "I can start today if needed." "Great, let's get started," Laura said. The next 3 months were amazing. I scheduled Laura's appointments and helped her plan her dinner parties. We ate lunches and dinners at the finest restaurants. She even took me shopping and bought me a new car. "So, Rebecca," Laura asked one night as we were having dinner at a restaurant, "what about your parents? Any siblings?" I swallowed and replied, "My parents travel a lot for business, and I am an only child." I drank some wine and continued, "Do you and Mr. Hamilton have any children?" Laura's face looked blank as she responded in a faraway voice, "My husband was lost at sea, and my daughter—" Just then, the waiter approached our table. "Do you ladies need anything?" Laura's blank facial expression faded, and she returned to her usual jovial self as she chatted with the waiter. When the waiter left, Laura turned her attention to me. "I have a business trip to go to tomorrow, and I was wondering if you would like to accompany me." "I would love to!" I exclaimed. "Great. We will stop by your place so you can get your passport and whatever else you may need for the trip." My mind screeched to a halt. My passport. My passport had the name Jolene Miller, not Rebecca Miller. I gulped down the last of my wine and wondered how I was going to talk myself out of this one. After dinner, just as planned, Laura's chauffeur, Alex, drove us to my place, where I collected my stuff. What am I gonna do now? The jig is up, Jules. You better confess sooner than later, I mumbled to myself as I packed my bag. After packing and securing my tiny apartment, I headed back to the car and contemplated whether or not to tell Laura about the lie that I spun to get the job. I decided that tonight I was gonna make the best of it and let tomorrow see about itself. As soon as we got to Laura's, Laura excused herself. I have a few things to finish organizing for our trip tomorrow, but let me show you to your room. I sent all the staff home for a little holiday since I would not be here for the next few days. My room, just like everything else in Laura's house, reeked glamour. From the king-sized canopy bed to the expensive piece of art that covered the walls. I sat on the bed and thought about my dilemma, and before long I fell asleep. I opened my eyes slowly and sighed. Well, Jules, today is the day. Time to kiss your new job goodbye. Something was different. I looked around slowly, then shot into a sitting position. Where the hell am I? I tried to move off the bed, but tumbled off awkwardly as my foot was chained to the bedpost. This wasn't the glamorous room that I fell asleep in. My heart stopped and my blood ran cold. Why was I chained to the bed? Where was Laura? What the hell was going on? I shrieked as I tugged at the chain. I shouted for help for what seemed like hours, but no one came. I sat on the bed and cried. I probably fell asleep because when I awoke, there was a tray with some sandwiches, a mug of juice, and a note in Laura's handwriting. Dear Rebecca, thank you for coming home. I have not seen you in such a long time. I know that the last time we saw each other, we got into a huge fight. I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry. I have chained you to the bed in the basement because I just want to keep you safe, where I can keep an eye on you. I don't want to lose you again. Love, Mom. This is not happening. This is not happening, I repeated to myself as I tugged at my hair. Laura, my name is Jolene, not Rebecca. Let me out of here, I screamed at the top of my lungs. If the staff really did go home, then there was nobody left on the large estate that could hear me. I sat and sulked. The chain was attached to the bedpost. Then I got a brilliant idea. All I needed to do was kick the bedpost out and the chain would fall out. I kicked, pushed, tugged on that bedpost like my life depended on it, because it did. I wasn't about to be held captive by some psychopath. Finally, the bedpost came loose, and I was able to move around. My arms and legs ached, but at least I was free. I noticed there was a small window at the top of the basement. There was a table and some boxes in the corner. Maybe I could squeeze through the window and escape. It was already dark. The moonlight was shining in, highlighting the night creatures that ran across the basement floor. I wish the basement was as glamorous as the rest of the house. I panted as I dragged the table across the floor, then piled the boxes on top. I climbed gingerly to the top of the makeshift pile, but my heart shattered when I realized that the window had solid steel bars. There was no way I could get those loose. Hi, Becky. I stumbled down the pile and crashed to the ground with a thud. I'm not Becky, I yelled. My name is Jolene. I looked around the room frantically and noticed 4 cameras, each placed securely in the 4 corners of the room. That's how you escaped last time, honey, so I made sure to secure the windows this time, Laura said sweetly. Last time? I scratched my head in disbelief, talking to myself. Then it hit me. Laura had done this before. The ad for a personal assistant was extremely specific, even down to the person's name. But I never questioned why she would want the person to be named Rebecca. Who was Rebecca? I paced the room back and forth, trying to think of ways to escape. I searched for secret passages, a key that may have been left behind. I even ran and smashed into the door, hoping that it would budge. Well, that didn't turn out too well either. The only thing I ended up with was a bruised shoulder. That basement was my home for the next 7 days until something truly bizarre happened. While asleep, I felt someone place their hand over my mouth before quickly covering it with duct tape. The person was dressed in all black and wore a black mask. I fought against the intruder and was able to knock them to the ground, and I ran. My legs felt like jelly as I pulled the duct tape off my mouth. I sounded like Scrooge's business partner Marley from the Christmas Carol, as the chain that was still locked to my foot dragged behind me. I tried every door and every window I came upon, but they were all locked. I needed to escape. I felt the walls closing in around me. Suddenly, it went black. Someone had thrown a black sack over my head and thrown me over their shoulder. How unlucky could a girl get? First I was held captive, and now I was being kidnapped? But why? The person was much stronger than a person I fought with in the basement. The person moved quickly, and soon I could feel the cold breeze on my exposed legs. Where are you taking me? My muffled scream sounded from the bag. I heard a door open and I was thrown into the back seat. The screeching of the tires alerted me that we were now moving. I waited for what seemed like an eternity before the vehicle stopped. I heard the door open and I began to kick and scream once more. Hey, Lady's voice said, we're here to help you. I was a bit confused at first, but I still still sat and allowed her to take the sack off my head. "You?" I said much louder than I intended. It was the same maid that I bumped into the day I had the interview with Laura. She greeted me with a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Angela, and this is my partner." She waved at the man coming around the van. "Jeff Hamilton." "What? Where?" Incoherent words fell out of my mouth. I was so confused. "Laura said you were dead," I said, looking at Jeff. "Well, I can assure you that I'm not," Jeff said with a smile. "But why?" I asked with a puzzled expression on my face as I looked from Jeff to Angela for answers. "Well," Jeff said, scratching his head, "my marriage to Laura was arranged. She was always so stern and tense. She wanted everything done her way. She was bossy and mistreated me and the staff. I always felt stuck in that marriage. I wanted out. So when the storm hit that day and we were on the yacht, I made my escape. My body was never found, so everyone just assumed I was dead. A few months after my horrific accident, I met Angela. I confided in her, and we've been inseparable since." Jeff winked at Angela, and she blushed. I looked at Jeff and raised my eyebrows. "But who is Rebecca?" I watched as pain flushed Jeff's face. He dipped into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He removed a picture and handed it to me. "This is Rebecca, our daughter," Jeff said softly. My jaw dropped open. I felt as though I was looking at a picture of myself. "What happened?" I asked, handing Jeff back his picture. I watched as he secured it in his wallet, then his pocket. "Rebecca died in a car accident about 6 months ago," Jeff choked. Angela placed her hand around his shoulders and comforted him. Jeff continued when he was more composed. "I am sorry that you got mixed up into this. You were not the first person that Laura has done this to." My eyes widened and I felt my stomach churn as Jeff told me about the 3 other girls he had to rescue from Laura's clutches. He pointed at himself and Angela, "have tried getting Laura the help that she needs, but she refuses. She has always been stubborn." "So what happens now?" I said half aloud, wondering if I were dreaming and if I would soon wake up. "It's not safe for you to go home," Angela said quickly. She opened the front door of the vehicle, and in her hands was a key and some clothing. She handed me both and said, "Hurry, we have a private plane waiting for you, but you need to hurry. You can't go back to your apartment in case Laura shows up." Jeff chimed in. "I am pleading with you. Please don't tell anyone about this. Laura doesn't need to go to jail. She needs to get help. I am willing to give you $10 million to disappear and change your identity. Now get dressed quickly. Time is against us." Jeff closed the door to the vehicle and I was alone with my thoughts. As I unlocked the chain with my leg and dressed into the clothes that were given to me, I thought about my choices. I could take the $10 million, escape, leaving my parents and old life behind while hoping the next personal assistant makes it out alive. Or I could go to the police and make a report. Please, viewers, help me make a decision.
I guess I'm what you would call a bit of a nerd. At least that's what the kids at school told me. I am Neil, so my nickname, of course, was Nerdy Neil. It was because I was curious about everything. I just wanted to learn, so I asked my teachers lots of questions. My life wasn't that great, to be honest, but all that was about to change. I was about to become super rich. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more shocking stories. The day my life changed started off pretty normal. I walked to school by myself and hung around the playground waiting for the bell to go. I was just about to go to the math classroom when I saw her. She was absolutely stunning. My heart was beating madly and my stomach had butterflies. Who was she? As we shuffled into the classroom, the teacher turned to us and said, "This is Laura. She's new, so make sure you all let her feel welcome. Why don't you sit next to Neil?" I smiled shyly at Laura as she came and sat next to me. She didn't really look at me. Why would she? I knew she was out of my league. The class began, and as usual, I spent half the time with my hand in the air, ready to ask another question. At break time, I went and sat down in the corner on my own, as I always did. "Hi," I heard a voice say. I looked up and was surprised to see Laura standing in front of me. "Can I sit with you, please?" she asked. Yes, as we strolled along. Laura told me how she and her younger sister Beth had just moved to our town with their parents. She laughed at everything I said, and she made me feel really special. It started to get dark, and I knew we should head home. I really didn't want our date to end. "Do you want to go out for a burger on Saturday?" I blurted out. "I would," said Laura, "but I have 2 friends coming into town on Saturday. Maybe we could have a double date." "Oh, yes, that would be great," I said happily. When Saturday afternoon came, I was so excited. I picked out something nice to wear and set off to meet Laura at our local diner. When I got there, she was already sitting there with her friends. A boy a couple of years older than me and a pretty girl with blonde hair. "Hi, Neil. This is Mike and Julie," said Laura, introducing us. I smiled and sat down next to Laura. I felt a bit left out as they sat there chatting up on old times. Of course, I couldn't join in the conversation, so I just sat there quietly. Neil, this is Mike and Julie, said Laura, introducing us. I smiled and sat down next to Laura. I felt a bit left out as they sat there chatting up on old times. Of course, I couldn't join in the conversation, so I just sat there quietly. Come on, Julie, let's leave these boys to it, said Laura. We just need to go to the bathroom. What they mean is they just need to go and talk about us, said Mike jokingly when the girls had left us. I smiled at him. I felt really awkward sitting there. What should we talk about? Mike looked like a football kind of guy, and I hated sports. Suddenly, Mike stood up and looked at me. Shh, he said, holding up one finger to his lips. With that, he jumped up and shot behind the counter. I realized the cashier had just popped into the kitchen for something. I watched as I saw Mike open the cash till and pull out a bundle of notes. What was he doing? Was he crazy? He was going to get caught, and we would probably all go to prison. I was starting to panic as he came and sat back down beside me. He was grinning as though nothing was wrong. I didn't know what to do. Just then, the girls came back from the bathroom and joined us at the table. I looked at Laura chatting to her friend Julie. How could she be friends with people like this? I thought she was really nice. Then I realized she had absolutely no idea what kind of person Mike really was. A thief. We finished our meal and left the diner. As we walked outside, I felt sure the police would be waiting for us. But no one was there. Mike had got away with it. I didn't mention anything to Laura. I didn't want to upset her. Monday morning, I set off for school. I had thought about what had happened all weekend. I decided I wasn't going to mention it to Laura. I didn't really know Mike. Maybe it was the first time he had done anything like that. I smiled as I walked through the school gate and saw Laura standing there. Hi, Neil. I've been waiting for you, she said, smiling. Do you want to come to my house after school tonight? Yeah, sure, I said. Cool. Meet you at the school gates, she called as she went off to class. Oh my gosh, this was it. She wanted to introduce me to her parents and sister Beth. Surely this could mean only one thing. She wanted to make us official. I was so happy. The day went by in a dreamy haze. I still managed to pay attention in class. I didn't want to miss out on anything there. At lunchtime, I could hardly eat a thing. All I could think about was going to meet Laura's parents. When the final bell rang, I threw my books in my bag and ran off to the school gate. Laura was there before me. "Sorry I'm late," I gasped as I ran up to her. "It's fine," she said, laughing. "I've only been here 2 minutes." We chatted all the way to Laura's house. I felt so nervous, which made me talk even more. When we got to Laura's house, I have to admit, I was a little surprised. She lived in one of the biggest, most expensive houses in our town. I hid my shock. I didn't want her to see. She may have thought I wasn't good enough for her. We went and sat in the lounge. I was expecting to see her parents there waiting, but maybe they were in the kitchen. "Would you like a cup of tea?" asked Laura. "Oh, yes, please," I replied. She was about to walk out of the room when she turned to me. "Oh, just one thing. Whatever you do, do not go into that room," she said, pointing at the door at the other side of the room. "I don't want you to see what's in there." That was strange. Why would she say that? What on earth could be in there? My curiosity got the better of me. I'll just have a quick look, I thought. Quietly, I tiptoed over and opened the door. I looked into the room. It was an ordinary room, just with some books on the wall and a table and chairs in the middle of the room. As I walked nearer to the desk, I saw on the top of it was a puzzle with sliding bolts on it. I pushed each bolt across until it locked into place. As the last one snapped in, a red button rose out of the table. Well, I had to press it, didn't I? As I pushed down the button, I heard a whirring and sliding noise. I turned around and the wall behind me had slid across, revealing a hidden room. I felt really nervous, but I just had to have a quick peek in to see what was inside. I couldn't believe my eyes. In the room was a huge pile of $100 bills. There must have been more than $1 million in there. Suddenly, I heard a noise. Laura was coming back. I ran back to the desk, pressed the red button, and the wall slid shut again. I just managed to sit back down on the sofa when Laura walked into the room. "Here's your tea," she said. "Do you want a biscuit?" I could hardly speak. All I could think about was all that money. "I'm okay, thanks," I said. "Where are your parents?" "Oh, they've gone away for a long weekend." "They won't be back until later tonight," Laura replied. I felt a bit disappointed, but I knew it wouldn't be too long before Laura would invite me to meet them. When I got home, I could hardly sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about all that money. If I had that much money, I would travel the world, starting with Disney World. I'd always wanted to go there. I would buy a fast car and a big house. I knew if I had lots of money, my life would be amazing. I would have loads of friends and the perfect girlfriend, too. That's when I realized what I had to do. Somehow, I had to get back in that room and steal the money. The next day at school, I bumped into Beth. "Hi, Beth," I said. "How was your weekend?" Beth looked at me